And good evening and welcome to the South County Fire Board of Commissioners regular board meeting for July 16, 2024. I'll go ahead and call us to order. Ask everybody to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, commissioners, I don't have anything else for the agenda. You've got the draft agenda in front of you. Anything else for the agenda? Anything else for the agenda? If not, I'll make a motion that we adopt the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as is. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. That takes us then to the consent agenda, item number 4 on the agenda, which has the claims vouchers totaling $1,476,783.79. I'll make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda item. And there's a second by Commissioner Wittes. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda items. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. That brings us then to item number 5, which is approval of the meeting minutes. We have 2 sets of meeting minutes. They are the July 2, 2024 regular meeting minutes and the July 9, 2024 work session meeting minutes. I will make a motion that we adopt those 2 sets of meeting minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Chan. It's been moved and seconded to adopt those 2 sets of meeting minutes. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving forward then in the agenda to item number 6, we are at public comment. Let's start first in the room. Is there any request for public comment here in the commissioners meeting room? Any request for public comment? Seeing none, we'll go online. Ms. Blankenship, do you have anybody online that is requesting public comment on the Zoom?
I do not.
No. Okay, thank you. We'll come back then to the room one last time. Any request for public comment in the room? All right, thank you. Seeing no request for public comment, we will move on in the agenda. Thank you. To item
Hey,
number
Jim?
which is
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
For one of the cameras in the room, it's the TV that's to your right is blocking the camera, and so you're not on camera a lot when you're talking.
We're working on it.
we're-
Sorry about
We're
that.
just
Okay.
getting that
Okay, cool.
moved. So you should be able to see us a little more. We can see you good though, so. Right. All right. So that takes us forward then in the agenda to item number 7, which is the fire chief's report. And good evening, Chief Eastman.
Good evening, Chair Kenny and the rest of the board, the public and staff, and Liaison Swisher. Tonight, Jason, Chief Isatel is going to give the chief's report. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Isatel.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, good evening, everyone. So I've got 3 topics to go over really quickly with you tonight. The first is the 4th of July update. We were very busy. We had lots of calls on the actual 4th of July, but I'm happy to report the fires there were far fewer fires and definitely less severe fires in all categories. So we had no multifamily fires, we had no residential fires, and I'll show you some numbers here on a slide in just a minute to show you a little bit more what we have, but far fewer, far less severe. So we'll look at the Snow 911 July 4th. So this is from 7 a.m. on the 4th to 7 a.m. on the 5th. And you can see the numbers there for the emergent calls, about 500 more this last year. Thus a lot more calls in the county. And then also more on the non-emergent side. You can see the time where the calls really started to kick off is at 6 to 7 o'clock in the evening. And then actually there was a bit of a blip. I think it was right around 11 or midnight or so. And then they really started to stagger off an hour after that. So I think that's normally pretty consistent, at least in the years that I've been out and about on the 4th of July of when there's the most aerial activity with the fireworks and that. So again, that's for the entire county. Next slide. So specific here to South County Fire. So this is for fireworks, right? So this isn't all calls or anything. This is just for the fireworks. We had one minor injury. We had one structure fire, which actually was just a shed fire down in Terrace at Lake Ballinger. We did have 13 brush fires. Now, some of those could have been very small bark fires and planters and parking lots, but we didn't have any large scale brush fires along I-5 like we've had in the past, and definitely didn't have any of those where we interface with, the trees and the brush at the neighborhood level out Station 13's area, the power lines down in Briar with the power lines and that. So they were much smaller and were able to be put out much quicker. And then the other outside fires we had, I think in the numbers that I looked, like 3 of those were dumpster fires. So, origin unknown or cause unknown, but they're common. We get those anyway. So not necessarily correlates to fireworks. So overall, there was 22 fire calls related to fireworks and then the 1 medical. And you'll see over the July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, there's some data at the bottom there. 2 fireworks related fires that were confirmed on the 3rd, 1 on the 4th, and then 7 on the 5th. But you'll see the suspected on the right side there is we just couldn't prove that that's what caused the fire, but it's highly likely. So staffing wise, we were very fortunate this year. We were able to upstaff 2 engines with 3 personnel. So we had engine 11 Adam and engine 21 Adam for the 12-hour coverage period. As you know, I sent an email out as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. We were able to get Brush 11 in town just days before. Chief Curtis did a great job of getting that here, getting some decals on it. The Wildland team was able to put together a complement of equipment very quickly on the 3rd. So that we could have that ready to roll on the 4th. And it did go out and participate in a couple of those brush fires. So we had a couple of Wildland team members on that we moved on to that apparatus for that period of time. And so it was very useful. Just to know there's more work now to be done on the brush truck. So it'll be going out of service to get radios and outfitted with some other equipment and mounted stuff. But we were able to get it in service at least for what typically is our biggest day for the brush truck, which was the 4th. So with that, unfortunately, we have not gotten any data for you from the sheriff's office. So my understanding is potentially the person at the sheriff's office has been on vacation that would be providing such data and maybe just came back as late as today. So when we get that we will bring it forward probably by email, and then if need be, bring it to a meeting to discuss it further with you. So we apologize for the delay on that, but it's kind of out of our control, but we'll get it. We're still seeking it out. So with that, I'll move on to the next email that I sent you folks was on the 11th at about 10 in the morning. We had an electrical vehicle fire down in the south part of the RFA. So it was actually in Station 20's area. Engine 16 happened to be the first engine. It came in as a fire single for a car fire. Because of the amount of smoke and the location of the smoke and additional callers, it was upgraded to a fire commercial. And then when our crew got on scene, they upgraded it to a hazmat call as well. So they asked for a second alarm hazmat. So second alarm is not only our hazmat 12, but starts to bring other county resources in until they could figure out what they had and what the extent of it was. And it was parked in near a charging station, as you can see in the picture, and a lot of other vehicles. So we kind of brought in quite a few resources. They were very quickly able to get a hose line underneath the vehicle and start cooling the batteries on the vehicle and putting the fire out. And then, as you'll recall, we have purchased the electrical vehicle blankets, which is a tactical item that we use to basically, as you can see in the picture, envelop the vehicle, reduce the amount of oxygen in the environment within the blanket there. And then with the water cooling and the lack of oxygen, the idea is the fire will go out. And hopefully stay out. In this case, Dick's Towing got on scene and they went to remove the blanket and identified very quickly that the fire was not out. And so they put the blanket back on and continued to cool. So it ended up being a lengthy call. It was contained to the vehicle. Everybody on scene was very helpful. They were very patient. So these are kind of an emerging threat, if you will. I knew right away as soon as I heard it that I better get an email off to you because these have been in the news in Seattle a lot. And so we wanted to make sure, give you a heads up, both so you could hopefully catch the news and see what was reported. But also so that, we could talk with you about, thank you for, the purchasing of the equipment. Thank you for supporting the crews. There's a lot of training nationally at the state level and at county level when it comes to these EV fires, and everybody's doing slightly different things. There is a Senate bill out there that I read about today that looks like it's going to allocate some money to the state patrol to be able to study the impacts to fire departments, the impacts to law and to towing. I actually did a questionnaire for it today and was able to represent our data and our concerns with them. So we know it's a problem. We're getting the education. The hazmat team locally within the RFA as well as in the county, they're working on this. They're developing protocols. They're developing procedures. This is, I think, the first one that I'm aware of in the RFA that we've had where we've actually had to use and deploy the blanket and, take the extra time to keep it enveloped in the blanket to get the fire out. So ultimately, Dick's Towing was able to tow this vehicle. Hazmat team was able to follow them. They put it in the middle of a gravel parking lot somewhere that the dealership owned. And then they sat on with it and watched it for several hours until they were fairly certain that it was out. The problem with these is though, hours later, days later, they can start smoking again and take off. So that's kind of my update when it comes to the electrical vehicle fire. There's one more picture here. And so this is a drone shot, obviously. You can see the hose line on the top brings the attic piercing nozzle down that we have. So it throws water in all directions. So that slid up underneath the car to cool the battery set. And then the ground monitor there is used to capture the toxic smoke and such, and then dilute it within the water. Department of Ecology was called and we did all the reporting and such. So that's kind of the status. That kind of gives you the layout. Obviously, I know there was a question, somebody emailed me back about why uphill, upwind. Those are hazmat terms, so that you're not in the runoff of the product and that the wind's carrying any smoke or toxic vapors away from you. So in hazmat world, we try to be uphill, upwind to avoid being where we don't necessarily need to be for exposure reasons. So the hazmat unit carries the blankets. That's why they were called out. A big part of this is air monitoring, and they do air monitoring at the scene. They set the exclusionary zones and, where it's safe and where people need to be on SCBA and where the incident commander can be and where the public can be farther back. So again, we're developing all of this. This was a good exercise to put in what we have trained on, and they're going back and making some tweaks based on how this went and again, in the RFA and at county level. So, and then the last thing, quick Sound Transit light rail update. Last night, Chief Eastman, myself, Chief Chalfant, and Chief Wells were able to go down to a work session with the Linwood City Council. And Sound Transit was there to give an update on the extension into Linwood. It was very informative. And then the Linwood Police Department had some time to discuss their planning and what they're looking at and their concerns and what they'll be watching for. And then obviously we were given an opportunity to address the city council. It went very well. We basically explained what we've explained to all of you about our relationship with Sound Transit, the money that they've given us to purchase the equipment. that we have said equipment. We've trained on that equipment. We've trained to the operational level. We trained to the tech level, and we're ready to go. And really, I just wanted them to be reassured that we're ready when they go to revenue in late August. But we're set. So one last test that's coming, and this is the part that I wanted to let you know, was on the 27th. It's a Saturday from 11 to 2. We're doing the final full-scale exercise. So we're going to be able to put it all to the test and see if there's any final tweaks we need to make before the August start. So it'll be a simulated derailment just south of the Montlake Terrace Station. There will be 20 to 30 live patient actors. So there'll actually be people playing injured and moulaged and all of that. The agencies that'll be included is, of course, South County Fire, Shoreline Fire, Sound Transit, Snow 911, NORCOM, Linwood Police Department, Lake Terrace Police Department, and then, of course, the state DOT as well. We'll all be playing functions within this simulated derailment. We're sending an engine, or actually multiple engines, a ladder, medic units, of course, our technical rescue unit that's carrying all the lifting equipment and such, battalion chief, and then the makeup of the personnel. Some are on duty and some are off duty. And of course, Sound Transit's been generous enough for the funding to be able to cover the overtime for some of our training and for this drill. So, and again, this is an opportunity to do a final test and run through on our plans. And then dispatch, operationally, we've had some new run cards produced, and so we'll be able to run those, and dispatch will be able to be involved and use some of the new terminology because light rail's new. It's all new. And then finally, we're going to put our training to the test. So those are my 3 updates for tonight for you, and I'll take any questions if you have them.
Questions for Chief Isatelo? Commissioner Chan.
Yeah, well, this is a very good report. I mean, really appreciate that. God, so I'm just scribbling on this. Okay, the rehearsal, what day is that and what time?
The 27th, I believe it's a Saturday. From
July
11
27th.
Yes, July 27th.
And Saturday
Yeah, from 11 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon.
afternoon. Okay, so are we able to see the actual climb up to the rail and that type of thing?
I don't specifically know any more than
well-
it's a planned, simulated, derailment. So I don't know it, just that it'll be south of the Montlake Terrace Station.
Train
Yeah.
station. I assume it's they probably announce it to the public
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
So anybody can go there and watch it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know about, where to send you to view it or not, but if
No,
you're-
I mean, just as a public, go there and watch it. I mean,
Yeah, I
as a-
suppose. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, because that's very important, very interesting.
Okay.
Second question I have is you said this is the first time ever to the EV, charging.
Mhm.
Are there any nationwide standard EV, because different people put up different stations and all that stuff? Are there any standard at all
For this,
for putting on a gas station?
for
gas
the
station, you
charging
have all the-
stations,
Yeah.
I would assume they're regulated.
So I can tell you they are regulated, and they're part of any of the new construction that's being done, and they go through a permit process. And, I don't know specifically what the fire marshal's office does with it. But I do know that there is a way it's done, and it's got to meet permit and got to meet those things. I don't know what the specifics are with it, Commissioner Chan. But I do know, they have to follow very specific standards when they do it, and it's through the permit process, and I don't know how much of it the fire code official does versus the building official. But they are pretty consistent across the board, the things that they do, and they're not done, at least in the state of Washington.
So how usually, what causing that fire? That's do anybody know?
Specifically, I don't know. It's something, typically if it's with the batteries and stuff, that's where we get the combustion that's very difficult to put out. So there can be a lot of different causes to it, but they seem to be in the news more and more often.
Yeah.
And, the other surprising thing is we seem to be seeing more of the rechargeable like appliance batteries and stuff too, that seem to be more in the news about causing fires, potentially causing fires, when they're left in the chargers for long periods of time as well. So,
So among the fire department, do they have some kind of standard how to approach this? Or this everybody's finding new
it's
things?
emerging. I've heard of departments that'll take these cars and put them in dumpsters and bury them in sand as a way to put them out. And you can imagine the cost and the work involved in that. There's some that flood them. There's some that, will tow them off and put them out in the middle of an area that they can't light anything else on fire and just let them go. So that's kind of what the state wants to be able to study with the funding that they're going to get so that we can develop some, and these are dangerous, right?
Right,
And
right,
and they're
right.
toxic. And so we need to make sure that, we're deconning gear correctly and that the runoff to the environment. And like, so what are the checks and balances? Like I said, we contacted the DOA so that they were aware. Obviously we flowed copious amounts of water. So a lot of any, toxins were diluted, but we're still developing all that. But
There's no national standard
no,
guideline to how
no,
to deal with it.
and honestly, Commissioner Chan, if you went to any fire-related conference, probably one of the top 1 or 2 attended classes in last year was EV fires.
Okay. No, very interesting. Thank you.
Commissioner Rowland?
Yes, actually, got to go out on that fire on the volunteer rig, and it was a very orderly scene. There was no panicking, nobody running around, not you guys, but even the public. I don't think anybody, if they were walking past, would even think that there was a fire there. One question for you, with those blankets, are they reusable?
I do not believe that they are, but
How many do we currently have in stock?
I believe they ordered 3, but again, it's the hazmat team and the hazmat group that are working on that. So I specifically at my level don't know. I just know that we have them. I know that they took quite a while to get and that they were fairly expensive.
But they're not reusable, so it's one and done.
I'm not completely sure on that, but I thought I recall somebody saying that they were not.
Okay. Yeah, all these different technologies. I know I mentioned one at a meeting early on, like a year or 2 ago about these, really fancy type thing. The blanket is a very easy solution, easy to transport. It's got a lot of advantages to it. If it's not reusable, I'm sure you guys have looked at all the options that are available right now. It's the best one that you guys used and it was successful. So, thank you for that. And to your question, Commissioner Chan, anything that damages one of those battery packs, piece of metal gets kicked up and punctures through, that'll immediately start a fire, overheating from charging, defects in the batteries, all those things. And once one of those, there's thousands of little batteries in there. Once one of those goes, the rest are gonna go because as soon as they are compromised, it's a mess. So
it become a high risk thing.
yeah, and especially like you said, the tow truck company coming on site, it will light up a day, 2, 3 days. Has been heard of where these things just start on fire in a dumpster or in a dumping lot. What's the word I'm looking for? Tow lot or yeah. So yeah, it is a big challenge and there's a lot of solutions out there, but I'm glad that we were able to help you be prepared for it. Thank you.
And Commissioner Rowland, I would add to the reusability of those. If you guys remember from last week when Chief Hudson was saying, we kind of went through the wood product decontamination and then almost most house fires are petroleum products, hence getting harder. And now we're going into a 3rd generation. We're realizing these batteries, it's a whole new element of decon for our bunker gear and everything. And it could change our approach even to the washers we're doing right now. So this is causing a whole new contamination issue.
Yeah, and the lithium ion batteries they're looking at sodium ion, and I'm not sure. I know sodium when it contacts water immediately starts a fire, so there could be challenges there as well. So that would be fun, shooting water on a fire that then just makes it worse. So you guys have your work cut out for you. Thank you.
Other questions for the chief? Go ahead.
Chief, thank you for a very detailed report and thanks to the crews, everyone involved here because this was a heavy lift. I really was pleased to see the brush rig was pushed forward to be ready for the 4th of July. That just brought a huge smile to my face. So thank you to everybody involved. Also, we kind of glazed over it, but I'm very pleased to see on 2 occasions now from your report and from today's fire, which is a Starbucks fire, which I happened to be at and was able to witness, our UAV deployed at least twice, maybe more. I don't know. So that's astonishing. For those that don't know that term, that's our drone. We funded that some time ago, and we've been asking when it would be operational. So I'm pleased to see that it is giving situational awareness. One follow-up question, if you don't mind, regarding the EV fire. I did see an email for those that were on site that we're also doing a follow-up health exposure. Is that correct? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's a pretty common. We get those as well if there was an exposure at a house fire or such. And so that's really just getting on record that you had a potential exposure. And that way it's in the employee's file and medical file so that it can be looked back to, later if there's health concerns or issues or that. So it's a work-related exposure, and that's, a state 301 form, if you will, of writing down, the information and the who, what, where, when, how.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And good luck on the full-scale exercise on the 27th.
Thank you. And I'll just add with the EV fire stuff, Chief wanted me to let you know, at the county level, there's a lot more discussions, and there's discussions, potentially about billing insurances, and these are costly items, lengthy calls and that. And as you know, we do bill for hazmat calls traditionally. This is very, very different. And so at the county level, we need to have those conversations. So we'll be bringing this topic back to you, when recommendations are made at the chief one level across the county.
Great. Other commissioner questions or comments on the chief's report? Any other? Okay, great. Thank you, Chief. Next up, we have item number 8, which is the union report with Local 1828 President Pat Moore. Good evening, President Moore.
Evening, commissioners. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the invite as always, but it's been a couple weeks since I've seen you guys. I didn't get a chance to thank you guys on the vote that you guys took as far as approving the deputy chief contract a couple weeks ago. And I just wanted to let you know I appreciate the support and getting that done. And we're happy that was able to get to a resolution, obviously. So thank you guys for that. Additionally, just kind of want to hit on just kind of give you guys a little, heads up. I don't know how much, if anything you've been heard about it yet. We have been kind of just started conversations with administration a little bit, as far as our membership, as far as recruiting, retention and whatnot. And I know that's something you guys discussed at the workshop, was that about a month ago, 2 months ago? And part of that discussion came, with obviously rising cost of houses in the area and whatnot, and how do we combat that? And so we've kind of started preliminary conversations, just discussing, even basically shift schedule changes and whatnot, and what that would look like moving forward in the future that might make it more accommodating for people to, what we're seeing is having to be living way outside of the area, hours out of the area just to afford a home, because they're not able to afford homes in Snohomish County. And so just kind of giving you a heads up, that is something that we are looking at. And, we recognize obviously wages probably aren't going to keep up with necessarily median house prices in the area. And so that's, the challenges that we all have, but we're looking at alternatives on maybe how we can deal with that issue, and looking forward to maybe exploring those as we move forward. Outside of that though, commissioners, there's not been too much going on our side of things. We've been meeting obviously with administration on some other items, and appreciate the relationships that we've been building with them, and been very collaborative efforts on both sides. We've been able to get some good stuff done, and come to some good agreements on some things. So, outside of that, I think that's all I got for you guys, unless you have anything for me.
Any questions for President Moore on the union report? Any questions from the board members? If not, thank you, President Moore. All right, that takes us forward in the agenda then to item number 9, which is unfinished business, starting with the financial management policies for action. And this will be with Chief Eastman.
Good evening again. CFO Bothwell is taking some well-deserved time away as we prep for the true budget time where he's has less ability to take some time off as we go through that process. So Aurora's here is here in his place. If the board has any specific questions to the finance division based on the financial management policies that we are bringing forward you for action. If you recall at the work session, CFO Bothwell gave you a presentation, kind of went through the changes that they're having in your packet. The agenda bill is on page 48. It highlights kind of the changes that were done. And then if you go through page 71, you can see a red line version of the edits that were made. And as Chair Kenny, staff is looking for action for approval of these tonight. And with that, I'll pause for any questions. And my guess is I'm not going to be able to answer them, and I'll move them to our finance manager and let Aurora address any questions that you have.
Are there questions from the commissioners on the comprehensive financial management policies update? Any questions? Commissioner Chen.
Oh, I just want to make a comment. This had gone through our finance committee. And then we explained during the last work session, we basically, a lot of, it makes sense, most of the changes in there. I think especially on the capital fund, we basically divide into 3 capital fund, which is, I think to me, is the apparatus and the equipment is basically part of the operation. It's really not much we can do anyway. Those are reserve fund. We, since what, 5 District 1, we have that kind of done already. So the capital fund to build a new facility and major renovation, that is critical part. That will be a huge amount. That should be completely separated because that can change, right? And also we need to depending on funding. So I think that's a very good arrangement. And the other one is a minor thing, but I guess my financial committee person, Chris or Commissioner Lawrence, if they want to add it to it, we just give confidence the rest of the commission that we have gone through that. It's good. And by the way, welcome, Aurora. Welcome back. Glad to see you again.
Other questions or comments from the board members about the comprehensive financial management policies update? Not seeing any. I think we're ready for action. I'll move the adoption of the update to the comprehensive financial management policies.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the update to those policies. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I just want to make a
Commissioner
comment.
Chan, go ahead.
I think financial policy is very critical for any organization. I think we start revising it. That's very good. I just totally support it.
Any other discussion on the motion? Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we will move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you from staff.
Thank you. That moves us forward in the agenda then to new business, item number 10. And we'll start with operations, item number 10A, operations division update with Chief Isatelo. And I believe it's also Chief Chalfant.
Thank you, Chair Kenny. I'm actually going to turn this immediately right over to Deputy Chief Chalfant, who's your Deputy Chief of Operations, for him to give you the update and briefing of the Ops Division.
All right.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chair Kenny, Board. Thank you for this opportunity. It's been a little while since I've had the pleasure of presenting operations update for you. So we will get this rolling. While the operations division truly covers all personnel from the response level at the stations up through administration, here at admin, it consists of Chief Isotelo, myself, and for those of you who have not had opportunity yet to meet Bree, our admin support specialist, we've included a little photo here of her. Bree joined the team back in February of 23, came to us from Seattle Police Dispatch and quickly became an integral part of not only the operations division as a whole, but administration building here at headquarters with all the rest of the team. She's been super important and instrumental in our ongoing conversion from workforce telestaff over to a new staffing program with the brand First Due, which you may recall we also utilize for our pre-planning needs and incident response. That staffing program is going to lead to increased efficiency at the battalion level as they work on the schedule daily. And then also it's about a half to 2/3 the cost of workforce telestaff annually. So it was a good move for us. And again, she's been instrumental in that conversion. For the operations division here at headquarters, our direct reports are the shift battalion chiefs, total of 12 of them on shift. What that means daily is essentially I have daily contact with the battalion chiefs for coordination of response-related activities, other functions and items that are going on at the street level, questions that might arise about response or administrative type details. They'll generally run through me. We provide a monthly operations meeting to the battalion chiefs. It's our opportunity once a month to get most all on these meetings of the BCs into one room to deliver one aligned message from all divisions monthly and also get two-way communication going. They'll bring in shift submitted items either from themselves or their crews to pass forward up to admin, questions for clarification, new items that might be needed at the response level. And we get that good collaboration amongst the entire group. We also conduct quarterly training for our BCs, 1 day per month internally for quarterly command staff training. This focuses solely on battalion level and above training items. Most of the time it's specific to response. So we do a lot of incident management scenarios, review of policy procedure guideline, make sure that we're compliant. For example, our most recent evolution of one of these for Q2 of this year was focused 100% on light rail operations. I introduced what our plans were initially for our response plans, what types and diversity of resources, total number of resources we're going to send. We ran some scenarios. We talked about communication process because if you think about that, the complexity or potential for a light rail incident, it's going to involve a number of different communications channels through SNOCOM, which we generally operate on 1 to 2 maximum. We could be looking at 4, 5, 6 channels potentially in a major incident. So we tried to focus in on that. Additionally, I meet with each of the BCs once per quarter for one-on-one training or conversations with them. And it's really their time to have them build an agenda for me. We can come in and we can do just one-on-one communications, myself and the BC. We can go sit down with one of their crews, have an integrated conversation, let them ask questions directly up to an administrative chief, or we go out to the drill ground and do some fun stuff on the drill ground with the crews. And, I get that exposure back to them as well. For any BCs that are going through a probationary process, Chief Welch here 2 years ago, year and a half ago now, I'm responsible for their monthly probationary evaluations and performance evaluations through that process. So those are direct reports and what I do with them. As a reminder, again, operations includes all of our response level personnel. So our daily staffing is 70 from 08 to 2000 and 64 from 20 to 08 when our PAU units secure from duty. And that includes those numbers you see there. We got 3 BCs daily, 1 MSO, 15 captains, 16 drivers. It's got to include that tiller operator, 15 firefighter medics, and 20 firefighter EMTs at a minimum. Within those numbers, we also make sure that we have at least 2 of our specialties of technical rescue, hazmat, and the marine operator specialties at those stations. All of that leads to your daily staffed apparatus of 3 battalions, 1 MSO, 13 engines, 2 ladders, 19 aid or medic units, and then your 3 specialty or technician units. And then just for clarification, that 19 aid or medic units includes your dedicated resources, your cross-staff resources, and those that we consider drawdown units. So if everything hit the fan and we needed every station to be in 8 or medic units, we could roll 19 any given day, should we need to. That leads to our total line staff positions in operations of 320 with the totals you see there, 12 battalion, 4 MSOs, 60 captains, 64 drivers, and then right around 100 each for those medics and firefighters. So a lot of personnel. For my position specifically in operations, I would tell you that the last 5 years has taught me a lot. And what I'm left with, if I break it down to its most simplest terms, is what I have written here. It's really about compliance, performance, coordination, collaboration, and the customer service, kind of where it all comes together. It's a lot of collaboration and coordination with all division heads here at headquarters, as well as some external agencies within our region. I do my best to confirm compliance for South County Fire back to the law, specifically WAC 296-305. Make sure our policies are up to date, again, in accordance with the law, SOGs, that we're following NFPA standards to the best of our ability and as appropriate and applicable, and that we're also in line with the contract with Local 1828. As I said before, I work close with all the division heads, coordinate and communicate for information back to staff downstream, upstream, and across the board, really anything that impacts service delivery and or our personnel out there on the street. We're going to monitor the industry for trends, possible impacts through legislative or other actions. Try to keep our heads up as to what's coming. You know, sometimes that's as simple as reading some email blogs that come through and you see trends coming across the country of people stealing fire department apparatus from hospitals or grocery stores. Allows us to get ahead of that a little bit, talk to our people about keeping a closer eye on those, taking keys out of medic units at the hospital, things of that nature. I also do a lot of work with some of our tags, our technical advisory groups, specifically our leadership, our incident management and deployment tags over the last couple of years has been the primaries. All that to help improve operations and leadership here at South County Fire. Continuing on, external to South County Fire, I currently serve as the vice chair for County Fire TAC. That is basically my peers from across the county and SNOCOM. It's their operations meeting every month, and then we talk about items pertaining to dispatch procedures, radio procedures, and making sure that we're all on the same page from the fire department through dispatch. Through that process, we've developed a few things, zone coordinators and FOC teams. For the zone coordinators, a great example would be last Thursday when we had that EV fire. We were particularly busy that morning at South County Fire. Then we had the EV fire. About 20 or 30 minutes into that, we had report of a residential fire out on the east side of our district here in the North Battalion. So we were fairly well stripped. It automatically then notifies all the zone coordinators in the county that our zone was depleted of resources. And then through the quickest method we found is through a text group. I started receiving text messages from my peers at Snohomish Regional, Marysville, Everett, District 4, and throughout the region stating, I have 2 engines I can send you immediately. I got an aid unit, I got a medic unit, and we can start backfilling South County Fire to the best of our abilities when we hit those high peaks. Similar to the FOC operations teams, we've divided into 4 specific FOCs versus all departments setting up an FOC should we have a planned or an unplanned outage at SNOCOM. And so for TAC 2, our normal fire TAC, the FOC is here at South County headquarters. Oh, sorry, Fire Operations Center. Okay, thought that was in line with everybody. We would operate that out of this building here, this room in most cases, and would also include Mukilteo and Painfield within that because we share the same operating TAC. We have a regional command staff training in which I wrote here specifically that I support that. We don't really develop a lot of material for that class. We rely on the battalion chiefs throughout the region to include some King County agencies like Eastside Fire, Bothell, and Shoreline participate. And it's really a quarterly event for the BCs to get in one room, provide education to each other that's relevant to their level, and also develop those relationships. So the first time they run into each other out on the street isn't the first time they're running into each other. They get a little more collaboration. We run some scenarios and they work through some differences between either agencies or even counties during that process. We've been instrumental in the mid-rise and high-rise operations plannings. I would tell you for the county that our document that has been in effect for about 15 years was utilized as the basis for a now county policy on mid-rise operations and high-rise operations. And we took part in that process through that committee. We also coordinate our response planning details and our response lists in some of the major events with the consortium, which is Everett, Marysville, Snohomish Regional, ourselves, and who am I missing? There's 5. Sorry, District 4. Yeah, thank you. And what we've done is ensured that for those major events like an MCI, technical rescue, hazmat, and then our confirmed fire responses, we're all dispatching the same units. And that helps people like Chief Welch here when he gets dispatched out towards Snohomish Regional on the east side of our area. He knows on a first alarm fire exactly what's coming because it's exactly what we send. So he doesn't have to adjust his method of management or resource management for those incidents. Lastly, I would say that for the operations division, we have some opportunities coming up for us. We're going to continue to work on leadership and succession planning through the division, downstream in that through battalion and captain's ranks, getting people interested in opportunities to move up. We need to develop, and I have some people working on projects to help develop operations planning specific to high rise under construction because it's a completely different animal. We've had some good education and training on it, and they're now working on some plans on how to further that along. I've already talked about light and heavy rail operations. Those will continue to go. The light rails we've finalized, and then I've adjusted, and we've actually created some new heavy rail plans that will cover both passenger and cargo trains to include deployment of Marine 16 on those calls. We will always be tweaking with deployment. I feel we had a great meeting earlier this morning where I think some really great information came out, and so that'll be continuing on. And then this last item here, I hesitate a little bit because it's really just a potential, but it's a scary potential. Federal OSHA has been working on some items since 9/11 of 2001, specific to the fire service. And to make a really long story short, they could potentially be pulling a trigger in November that would, and the quote is, incorporate by reference. They would incorporate by reference about 20 to 30 NFPA standards, so they would no longer be standard, but become law. And the impact of those projecting forward or looking, if all of those happened, we're trying to get our head and our hands around what that might look like. So as it was presented to us at a county chiefs meeting, it's tied to some political things. So they said it could disappear around November, but hard to say. So we're still just going to look into it and try to figure out what opportunities that's going to bring. So it's kind of a big one to get our heads wrapped around, but we'll have some more information if you need it downstream, probably late this summer, early fall. So that in a nutshell is the operations division and the role that I particularly play in it, as well as our battalion chiefs and Chief Isatelo. So happy to take any questions. Thanks for your time.
Questions for Chief Chalfant on the presentation? Any questions? No?
Yeah.
Oh, Commissioner Chan, go ahead.
Wow. You gave me too much time. I just want to thank you. This is a very extensive presentation. It's amazing that, I know when I first got on, we want regionalization, we want a consortium, we want a, building the region. I think we have done that work. I just compliment the staff and everybody else. Really, we are truly a very sophisticated, complicated, big operations. And maybe Chief Withers, I'm gonna put him on the spot. How's that compared when you first started in Fire District 1?
Quite different. I've grown up, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, at that time, how many engine, how many staff total have you had when you started?
Well, when I started at Fire District 11, I was the first paid firefighter
Oh,
and the only one responded.
this is amazing. Can you imagine this growth in here?
As with everything, we stand on the shoulders of those before us. So
Yeah,
we're carrying on the work that Chief Wittes, Commissioner Wittes started as a chief.
thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes, that was an excellent report. And as usual,
Thank you.
and I couldn't just let you walk away without making some kind of comment. I mean, it was good.
Thank
I
you.
mean, you put a lot of work, it's obvious, very smooth. It really gives the impression that you know what you're talking about.
After 5 years, I think I'm finally starting to understand what yeah. It's taken a bit to get my head fully wrapped around it, but thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Chief Chalfant? No. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Next up on the agenda in the new business is item 10B, which is our 2022 and 2023 1756 reports. And emergency response, kind of data update. So this would be Chief Isatalo and Ms. Pardee.
So I'm gonna do the 1756 overview. And then Jennifer's gonna go over our response data for the first half of the year. And then we're fortunate enough to have a whole commissioner room full of folks that can answer questions as we get there. So on page 82 is the agenda bill associated with the two 1756 compliance reports. This is for 22 and then the most current year of 23. Just a little bit of background. The legislation to do this was back in 2006. And what it required is for the fire organization to adopt certain standards. And then once you adopt those standards, you're required to report on those annually. And then the compliance report is then auditable by the state auditor's office. We're a year behind. We didn't do 2022, so we're catching up. In your packet is the compliance report for 2022 and 2023. If we start at page 84 of your packet, is the first page of the 2022 compliance report. And you can see the background information and the resolution that adopted in the original and all that. And for the board to know, we originally had set standards in 2006 and then amended them in 2011. And those are the ones we still work off today. If we roll forward to section 3, which is on page 88, Jennifer added a couple definitions because at my request, I added an additional timestamp. If you recall, the majority of the compliance report is based on travel time. So it's the time it takes us when we get out the door and we arrive on scene. And the problem with that is it's just one piece of the total picture, and it sometimes can be misleading. And when I say that, specifically when you get to effective fire force for commercial and residential fires, if you're only doing the travel time of the last arriving unit, you can have a very large disparity from what the actual total response time is for the last arriving unit to get there versus just the travel time. So what I've asked Jennifer to do is, along with the normal compliance that we do, which is travel time, I've also added the total response time, same percentage. And the reason I'm doing that is because the board has a standard of their own that we strive to get 90% of our calls in 8 minutes or less. And we've had that standard for a while. And so what I had her do is if you go, for example, on page, sorry, I got my glasses on page 88, and if you go to total response time, section 2A, first arriving engine company to a fire suppression incident, we have a travel time standard, which is set at 5 minutes and 45 seconds, which is drive time. Our travel time outcome, we did not meet that criteria. Our time at 90% is 6 minutes and 26 seconds. But the important aspect is you look at the response time outcome, which is our total response time. For those same incidents, we got to 90% of those calls from time dispatch picks up the phone to a time our first unit arrives is 9 minutes and 22 seconds. And so we've added that response time outcome, which is the total response time, to make sure that you see the whole picture versus just the travel time component. Because we look at things, we take into account in our department, and I'm proud of this, from the time people call 911, because that's when the incident starts for Mr. and Mrs. Smith when they call, to when our units arrive on scene. Not everybody does that. And so to quick go over, we measure our turnout times. Our turnout time standard is 2 minutes, 15 seconds. In 2022, we were at 2:49. When Jennifer does her report and shows you, she compares to years past. So you'll see the last, I think it's 5 years of data and see how that's trending. We also give you, and we added this in 2011, the total response time for all emergency incidents. In 2022, we were at 9 minutes and 8 seconds at the 90% mark for all priority responses. We already talked about the first arriving engine company. Deployment of a first full alarm assignment. This is based on our compliance. It's 15 firefighters on scene. I guess I'll tell you, I know Chief Chalfant and the rest of the team in ops, we send more than that. But our standard has been, we measure based on our standard, the first arriving 15. And if you go, and the travel time standard for the last arriving units is 12 minutes and 45 seconds. If you look at and the travel time outcome is the last unit to make up that complement of 15 firefighters was 14 minutes and 59 seconds. And then once again, I think the big picture for everybody to know is from time that the call was received to the time when that last unit arrived was 19 minutes, 11 seconds. And that gives you, I think, a much better picture, not just travel time, because it'd be misleading. And we were just outside the travel time standard on first alarm assignment for residential. If you look at 2C, which is the first alarm assignment to a commercial structure fire on these events, we make sure there's a minimum of 18. So that's the measure we use. Our travel time standard is 12 minutes and 45 seconds. We actually were just above that at 13 minutes and 38 seconds. And then our total response time, which is from time, again, dispatch picked up the phone for the call, and my last unit arrived, was 16 minutes and 21 seconds. First arriving unit with a first responder, which is a BLS, or higher level capacity. So that's medical incident. Our travel time standard is 5 minutes and 30 seconds. We were just outside of that at 6 minutes and 20. And then our total response time for those is 9 minutes and 8 seconds. First arriving ALS unit to an emergency incident, travel time, 7 minutes and 45 seconds. We met that and exceeded it, or met it. We had 6 minutes and 33 seconds. But our total response time, again, from the time dispatch receives the call to our arrival, was 10 minutes and 7 seconds. Hazmat, and some of the challenges with the hazmat, the technical rescue, is they're so small that we don't run that many calls. So it's hard to give you some of the statistical things that go with it. But the first arriving appropriate level operations hazmat technician, we have a time standard of 15 minutes. Our 90%, well, actually 100% of the time we were at 10:58 because we only had a couple incidents that met that criteria. And then the total response time was 14:44. First arriving for technical rescue operations is our travel time of 5:45. Our 90% was at 4 minutes, 53 seconds. So we met that. Total response time on that was 7 minutes and 17 seconds. For a technical rescue, so this is the higher level of training, we have a time travel standard of 12 minutes, and we had 0 incidents in 2022. So there's nothing to report on that. And then we also, because we have the Marine unit, we have a time standard for that, which is 30 minutes. And in 2022, we didn't have any that met the criteria for the Marine unit. So if you go to page 90, which is section 4, you can see the adopted performance standards that were not met in 2022, which was turnout time, total response time, travel time of the first arriving engine, first full alarm assignment residential, first full alarm assignment commercial, first arriving BLS on a medical call, and then on the hazard material operations side. And so that's there. And then we have a component there where we look about predictable consequences and corrective actions. And if you remember in 2022, we were still in COVID. And so there's a whole lot of things that happened as a result of COVID. If you remember, we had folks that were putting on appropriate PPE prior to leaving the station. We had extended delays in turnouts. We had delays if the crews are already responding that they had to put PPE on prior to going into people's homes. And so, in this case, because of that, and I realize we're looking back a couple years, looking at predictable consequences during the time of COVID was a challenge for everybody. And so it was a challenge. As we continue to look at corrective actions and standards, at that time, if you go back in time, we continued to work on our facilities plan. If you remember, it was in 2022 that we approved, the phase 2 of it, of the needs we had. And now we continue to work forward on how we actually going to implement, and then what part of the facilities plan are we going to implement. And as always, we monitor turnout times. And we continue to do that. And I know John and Chief Isotelo watch that. We go. So that's the compliance report for 2022. And rather than go through everything again in 2023, before you have 2023, which is on page 92. And the reality is we've been fairly consistent. And so if you look at the items not met in 2023, once again, our turnout time, total response time, travel time of the first responding engine, travel time of going to a medical emergency at the BLS level, hazardous material, operations level, and then technical rescue were the ones that were outside compliant in 2023. But we are being consistent. And the challenges on our multifamily or commercial fires and our residential fires are where you see, I think, the largest swings. And that has to do with when and where, the time of day and where those fires happen, and then how busy we are when that happens, right? Because if you're looking at the 7th or 8th unit coming in to get your 15th firefighter or your 18th firefighter, depending on what's going on, if we're busy and units are out of service, and if you remember in 2020, both in 2022 and 23, we had wall time challenges, that you could be getting your 7th unit from another station removed or further to meet that to meet the response that we need. And so you get some variability. And once again, we don't have a lot of confirmed full alarm assignment commercial and residential fires. It's a small number, so it doesn't take an outlier, something unique that goes on that kind of takes that number and moves it all over the place, because you're dealing with a small number versus, if you're looking at the first arriving unit to a BLS response, that's our bread and butter, and we have lots of them, and we tend to be more consistent. Our ALS numbers tend to be more consistent. Our hazmat, operations, our hazmat tech, our rescue operations, and our confirmed residential and commercial fires tend to have a little bit more variability, and that's because there's just less of them. And what's going on in the rest of the RFA when that happens has a larger impact, because you can have one that's way outside the box just because of what's going on and call demand, and it takes all your 90% numbers and skew them. So that's what I have for 1756, and I'm more than happy to take any questions now. But these will come before you again in a meeting. I don't know if it'll be the first meeting of August, because I'm going to be out of town. It may be the last meeting of August for the board to actually adopt, and then they'll be part of our official record. So we'll have another brief or another ability to ask questions on these 2 items prior to the board approving them. So I'll pause real quick if you have any questions on my part. And then after that, we'll move on, and Jennifer will give you the standard ops report that I know really is what you guys want to hear for the first 2 quarters of this year.
No,
Commissioner Lawrence.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Do we ever get to hear from Jennifer tonight?
Other questions for Chief Eastman on his report? Chief, I did have a question for you, and kind of looking at these two reports together, I've asked these to chiefs before you, and so I'll see what your answer is. And that is, in looking at both reports, to me, the most important measure is the overall turnout time for emergency incidents. Or total response time, which we've set at 8 minutes, 90% of the time. And for both 2022 and 2023, we didn't meet that by roughly a minute. I know that the resolution that you put a copy in there is from 2011. My recollection is we actually adopted that standard prior to 2011. I don't know how far in the past. I want to say 2005, but I could be wrong that it was 2003. It might have been.
I think so.
Okay.
Commissioner Wittes may know better, but it's
It's been a while.
It's been a while, and I think it was prior to me coming on days. So 2003 comes to mind for me.
Okay. And so, to my recollection, during that entire period of time, we've never met the standard of 8 minutes, 90% of the time. And so we get these reports every year. We never meet the standard. We talk a little bit about, well, here's some things we could kind of do. And I kind of feel like that's what these two reports say. Well, here's a couple of things we could kind of do. But they aren't really actionable. They aren't really like detailed, like these are the things that will make it happen. And so there is something magical, I guess, about the 8 minutes, 90% of the time. And that's the NFPA standard for, if I could recall, both flashover for a room on fire, but also the 8 minutes for brain death on like a cardiac arrest. And so that's kind of the background for why NFPA has the 8 minutes. But other than that, there's no magic to the 8 minutes. And so I've asked this question in the past, and so I'll put it to you. Why shouldn't we just change our standard to what we're actually meeting, which is, around 9 minutes, 9 minutes and 10 seconds, what we're actually meeting? Because I have never had anybody email me, call me, come to a meeting and say, you're not meeting your 8 minute standard. What are you going to do? It appears that most people just don't care. And so we keep talking about it, but we keep not meeting it. Why not just change the standard to what we're actually doing, which in this case is around 9 minutes?
So I will say that's an option. I think there is some value in having a target to maintain. I'm not saying 8 minutes is the magic target. I will say though, there were early days that we actually met the 8 minutes. It wasn't initially we were able to stay, within the 8 minutes early on. I have to go back and look at my stuff to know when we started drifting, and we've been at 9 minutes for a while, and sometimes a little more than 9 minutes, and sometimes just a little bit less than 9 minutes. I think we actually need to readdress. I mean, we're now the RFA. We're not where we were in 2011, and I think we need to spend the time when we have it. And I'm not saying we do it right away, because I may not make it home tonight with the staff that's actually in the room. But I think we need to actually look at our overall 1756 report and look at it and address what it should be. I think when, as we continue the conversation with the Capital Cities plan and the fact that we have info fire stations that will help, I'm not saying it's going to get us to 8 minutes. That's not what I'm saying. But I do know as our density increases, we've identified the gaps that we need to fill. And I guess I'm going to say we could set it at 9 minutes. But that really doesn't change the fact that the planning that we have in front of us, the work we've done with the facility plan doesn't go away, because if we don't do stuff to address not just filling in the gaps with responses, with resources to respond, but as we go vertical, and John talked about that when he gave his presentation to you. I need more resource going to high rise and mid rise, and not just for fire. Here's the problem. We go to those mid rise and you've got folks going up flights of stairs, and EMS calls require more people also to do the great work and maintain the service that we're providing folks go. So we still need to address the infill fire stations and what does that look like, and how do we go? I guess I think we as an organization need to talk about exactly what you're talking about and look at all our response, look at the whole 1756 report, look at where we want to go. You know, I think we do an exceptional job in the RFA because most people have the same total response time, except for they don't measure dispatch. They measure from when they get the call at the fire station to when they arrive on scene, and we measure what dispatch does too. So we are doing extremely well, you know, where we are at 9 minutes compared to the region. So I think it's a legitimate question, Commissioner Kenny, and I think we should look at it holistically. And I think we need to talk about it as an organization because those standards are set. I think we have a conversation with you, but really what we're talking about here in the expectation is set by the board. And I think it's not a bad conversation to have.
So my follow-up to that is, which I've asked in previous years, is if we were serious about dropping the time from around 9 minutes to 8 minutes, what is the cost to do that over what period of time?
Well, I will tell you, the facilities plan says you need about $60 million in infrastructure, which is 3 fire stations. And you add, you know, 25 people for a minimum of each one of those fire stations, which is 75. And if you roughly say 10 people is $1.5 million, the math adds up pretty quick. So you got a initial cost of about 60 million, not including the additional apparatus needs, which we know engines and medic units are about 1.5 million for each station when you add them together, not including the equipment. And I don't know, and I'm not standing here before you saying that that'll get you to 8 minutes either, right? I think there's a reason we need it because of where the future growth is coming and the future development that's happening in our region and the density that's coming. And Commissioner Kenny, I don't know if that actually gets you. I don't know if it gets you to the 8 minutes. I think I've got really smart people with Jennifer and our GIS guru, which is Steve Wheeler. They can do a lot of things, but that predictive modeling, you know, it's a speculative game. And I'd hate to say that would get us to 8 minutes. I think it would improve it. I don't know if it improves it by a minute, but I will tell you as the fire chief, we need to have those resources in the very near future. As John's talking about, he's now done the mid-rise planning and he's now talking about high-rise planning. And part of our need to build those infill fire stations are because where the density is going. And it's as much about response times as it is about weight of response and the number of people we need at the new stuff we've got coming in the organization. Because if we don't, here's what happens is we have an event at a high rise and I've got nothing left. And then what happens is for the 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 town calls that happen during that event, I've got people coming from 5, 6, 7 station service areas away. So I don't know if that answers your question because it's challenging. And I'd rather, you know, I know we need it regardless. I just don't know if it gets us to the 8-minute response time that our target is. Although I think it's good to have a target to continue to strive and make us work at finding ways to become more efficient and ways to do the work, right? At the end. So
Commissioner Rowland, then Commissioner Chan.
sorry.
This is a follow-up question. So if you'd like to say something, Assistant Chief Maxwell, just go ahead.
If that'd be all right.
Yeah.
I had to smile when this question came up because I've been at these meetings long enough to know this question was coming. I guess to give a very pragmatic answer is the 8 minutes for EMS was based on getting a defibrillator there, which we know that that's way too long. 8 minutes is way too long. So that science is outdated. And as we were talking about earlier, we're no longer dealing with wood products, we're dealing with petroleum products. So arguably the science of flashover is probably faster too. So the 8 minutes is probably not realistic for fire or EMS. It's probably gone the other direction.
So
Our ops chief is answering that right now.
my question actually has to do with that. So can I just ask a quick follow-up to those two things? Number one is, in a structure fire, if there's a person that's trapped in the fire, how long can they survive after flashover?
Probably zero.
Zero. And how many people in your experience that have experienced brain death have come to one of our meetings to complain that we were too late? They're easy questions, right?
Your point is well taken. How about that?
I guess the reason I ask those questions is because commissioners, if you look, and I'm not trying to put him on the spot, but if you look at Commissioner Chan, he lives in the Lake Stickney Gap. He lives in one of the areas where he is least likely to get someone there in time to save his life. That's the cost of us moving those numbers up. Yeah, we're never going to hear about the people that don't make it because they're trapped and we didn't get there before flashover. Flashover is over 1,000 degrees in almost an instant, right? I've seen it. I've seen videos of it. It's terrifying. And as you said, no one can survive it. So we have to do better, all the time. I'm not criticizing you that we're not doing good. I think to your point, there's probably less time that we have now. So we need to make the investments necessary to be able to save the lives that we are tasked with protecting. And so I would say, A, I would never be in support of lowering those numbers. And B, we need to realistically look at the investments that we need to make and stop putting them off. Because we had an opportunity to do it when rates were low, interest rates were low. We could have done amazing things at the best time. That time's gone, but we cannot argue that, well, interest rates are too high now to invest. We're going to have to pay the cost of our not doing it when we could have, and we need to do it before we get into a situation where we need it.
Yeah, thank you. And we hear you. I guess the second half of what I was going to say is related to the performance side of things. So I have led the development of key performance indicators for the state EMS and at the federal level. And I've worked with a lot of scientists there. And when you raise the numbers, even though we might not be getting 8, if you raise it to 9 or 10, human nature. So when we developed all the KPIs, the scientists said, even if you aren't going to make 9, you stay at 8. And we did this on multiple things. And a very elegant study was done where everybody was breaking the speed limit. So they thought, well, let's raise the speed limit. And guess what? Everybody went faster to meet the new speed limit. So
I believe they call it Parkinson's law.
yeah.
If you increase the amount of time to do something, it'll take longer to get it done.
Yes. So in sum, while we may not meet them, Commissioner Kinney, I have thought about this question a lot. There is scientific reasons not to raise them, even though pragmatically it doesn't make sense. So thank you.
Final question, should they be lowered then?
Well, you can, yeah, I think that's good too. You can't have challenges if you absolutely can't meet something. People will give up psychologically on the other side. But it's I hear your point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chan.
Well, I think we got to think out of the box. Number one, actually, Commissioner Micah, actually, I am, you get to my house 6.5 minutes. Remember my brother? I told you so many times. Actually, right now, if you look at that vertical, I'm adding elevator time. How about the door? Open the door. Do you order the key over now, or you do have no? I mean, that's add another 2 or 3 minutes in there. right? Okay. So I wanted on the record, remember I first get on the commissioner? I said, well, I don't know anything about fire, but I'll ask stupid questions, okay? Number one, I think it's time for the motorcycle medic now. Medical, motorcycle medic. They basically in Hong Kong, all the British, when I'm in Australia, they have that. And they basically, when the traffic jam, they just go through it, okay? Motorcycle. Second thing is that, actually, Commissioner Merritt is the one talk about, how about instead of building a station, street level type of put in there, right? So in the downtown area, in the central, in the Linwood, really dense population, I think we should have street fun there, right? That's the density in there. I used to work in the downtown building, Buca di Beppo, I don't know if you ever remember that, right next to it. I haven't gone down to downtown too often. Now, the other day I went down, I was just shocked. All the building on the Outwood used to be AAA, they were all low. It's all tall building now. And you also know that near 196, where the convention center, most of them are senior citizen housing, shack. That is more call. I would even think you could just, a motorcycle just carrying the medical, just go on there. If we have few more of those things, then I think that will help. I think, to me, seriously, I'd rather lick stick there, because you come to my door, boom, you get in, right? And those, it's not that much traffic. So we got to really think about out of the box and think about, I remember you mentioned that we don't have the density or traffic jam. Remember when I first got Mother?
Remember, I'm the one that called Hardy and asked if I could get 2 motorcycles donated. That was a serious question,
Yeah.
and we looked at it, right? I think what I will tell you from the group, and Sean and Todd and Jason, Jennifer, Steve, I mean, we're looking at deployment in the lens that you're talking about, Commissioner Chan, and the question is, we have to constantly be looking at it. We constantly have to be looking out of the box, and we've had lots of conversations about, you know, we need the info fire stations that we're talking about, but we're going to have to also contend as the development happens and the density becomes more dense, we're going to look at, we will eventually get to a place that we're looking at things, alternate means of deploying our resources outside of traditional sticks and mortar fire trucks. Because the reality is I'll have enough heavy resource capability. I'll have the way to response for the fires and those kind of things. The challenge is the EMS demand is going to continue to rise.
Right.
And you are right. We're watching, and with Jennifer and Steve doing the work that they do. And quite frankly, to a certain extent, you know, we have a lot of intuitive things we're thinking, but I know they had a meeting this morning and they had some, oh, really? There's the data's right there based on what we're currently doing. Then the challenge is to continue to anticipate where it's going. And to be honest, I think we're really good at it.
Right.
And looking at what now the outside the box opportunities are, I'm proud of the fact that there's a team in this organization that is already talking about those things, now where it goes and what it does and the research required. But we'll get there eventually, and you will see some things that are not traditional. We're pretty good at bringing you forward non-traditional solutions to solve problems that we face in the RFA, and I
Well,
don't think it's going to change.
The problem
with
with
deployment.
the big stations, fire station, is that it's going to take lots of money. It takes 3 or 4 or 5 years to build one. So by the time the population changes, the standard change, that particular station may not be in the right position already, right?
Yeah, but we did that, Commissioner Chan. If you
Yeah.
remember, when we did the facilities plan, one of their primary things that they brought to the table was the population movement. We specifically talked about, is our population aging, and as they age, do they move, and do we have a moving EMS problem within the RFA? And if you recall, based on the census data that they have and the projections that they have, the reality is we're not anticipating that wholesale change, right? Where we thought potentially we were, at least what Burke did for us and the stuff we updated, we're not seeing the population being young, becoming old, and that becoming a center for stuff, and then having that, and I envision this moving around, right, as over the next 50 years as things, we're much more diverse than that. And obviously we have populations that are
Exactly.
right, but not populations that will impact response to the level that you're talking about in that sense.
Well, but I think on the city center itself, just in the Linwood Center. I
Yeah,
think- yeah.
and I think we need to, because that's going to eventually be the most dense
Yeah, exactly.
area in the RFA. And I'm looking at John and Sean and Todd, and
Right.
they know that. And, when we get to the place in time, there will be a plan to address those. And to be honest, I'm not sure what they are yet, because I think they're not done looking outside the box.
But I think we're pretty lucky. Remember, I was in a commissioner meeting, commission conference. I asked one of the rural area in East Coast, on the east of Washington, Eastern Washington. We talked about 8 minutes, right? And I asked a guy, what is the response time? And he said, same day service. Because they really do not have the resources. They don't have the funding, and they're living so far away from each one. So sometimes people have to realize that is critical. But anyway, so I was on the record. I'm giving you a motorcycle medic again. All right.
Any other questions for Chief Eastman on this part of the data report? Commissioner Wittes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say in the last, 25 years or so, we've only done one infill station. And that's some of the problems we've had. We haven't caught up or even kept up with the demand. We've added more units to stations, but that doesn't help the response time when they move out. And I think that's what the capital facility plan is addressing. I know we used to have those conversations before. Well, why not just change it? Which makes sense to a point. It's cheaper, it's there, but what would they be if we didn't have the extra resources we do now? I can imagine what that would look like. And when we were meeting them, it's because we were almost, I don't want to say overstaffed, but we were staffed well for the geographical area we had. The population's doubled pretty much. So that's where a lot of the problems are. And I think the capital facilities plan by nature will fix a lot of it. Now, again, the motorcycle medic, which I'm a fan of too, we watched the cardiac arrest thing. How many motorcycles do you need to get that many people on the scene? Okay, so that's one thing. And the other thing over time is, I believe when we started this, it was 12 people on the scene of a fire. And now it's up to.
Well, I think in a residential right now, John, correct me if I'm wrong, is it 24, 28? 28, and I think commercials are close to 34, mid-rise are 55.
Correct. And I think that's what's changed over when they first implemented this stuff. It was a little more achievable for departments our size. And now it's twice as many people that have to be there and twice as many stations have to respond. That was it. Thank you.
Actually, I want to come, when I say infill station, what I'm saying is not, instead of building one, why don't we just really get a strip mall, that type of thing, for medical.
You go to
That-
some
yeah.
places and that's what they do. They
Yeah.
actually live in the medic unit. They are not assigned anywhere. They don't have a house to go to. They send
Right.
the medic unit down to New York and that's what they do.
No, it is not my idea, it's Commissioner Mayor's idea.
And that's what they do. They
Yeah.
track where the calls are and that's what they do. And
Yep.
they can only work 8-hour shifts because they're off work. And one of the biggest problems I've heard being back there, hearing part of it is, where do we go to the bathroom?
Mhm.
Little things they don't think about. They don't make bathrooms on medic units. May have to.
So Commissioner Kenny, there are some things we are looking at though. Currently, we have 6 of our stations that are still cross-staffed engine medic unit, right? I think if we get to a uncross-staff model, and what I mean by that is I don't have a company that runs both an engine and medic like we do in Edmonds, like we do currently station 18 and 19 are cross-staffed, station 13 is cross-staffed. One of the things that I've asked Jason, Sean, and Todd to look at is to get to an uncross-staffed. We're too busy. We're too big. Back in the day when we were running 1,000 calls out of a station, being cross-staffed was efficient. It was smart. It was the right thing to do. With the call demand we have in the organization, with the call demand that's coming, we need to get to a place where engines are dedicated and not jump from an engine to a medic unit back and forth depending on the call type. The organization matured past that. I think. And once again, I haven't done and talked to the smart people that we have in the organization. But I do think there are some opportunities as we move forward if we uncross staff, get dedicated resources, put those resources where they belong. And I mean, engines are in stations, and then take our transport capabilities and move them. And that's what the work they're doing. I think we will improve response times. I'm not saying get us, to 8, but I think there are some fundamental things, and there's some things that we have existing in deployment that is legacy. What we all used to do when I first got hired in the organization 20 years, everybody was cross-staffed. And we've slowly gotten to a place where, we have dedicated engines and medic units. As call demand came up, we started doing that, back in District 11 days, and we did in District 1 days. But organizationally, we need to get everybody on cross-staffed. And I think we need to get there. And we'll have some conversations about what that means, what that looks like, and then take a year's worth of data and look at what that did for us, right? And then talk about, because I think we need to do that first, and then have the rest of the conversation and what do EMFL stations mean then, and see where it goes. So there is some things we are doing from a deployment that fundamentally is a shift from what we used to do. We've done it in parts of the stations in the RFA. We just haven't done it RFA wide, and we're going to be close to 40,000 calls this year. And I've got engines in downtown Edmonds that are and I get the contract component of that, but I'm anticipating that goes away. They become part of the RFA, and I've got 5 stations that are currently cross-staffed that probably need to be dedicated. That will help because it makes that unit in the station more reliable. So they're more apt to be in service when their call comes in their first due. Everybody then has more unit reliability. So if they happen to be gone, the odds are the second in is there to keep our response times better versus picking the 3rd, 4th, and 5th in as a second in unit. So there are some things we're working on, Commissioner Kenny. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that, I've got 3 guys that, and Jennifer and Steve, that they're working on those pieces specifically at the end of the day that will provide some intel and answers to the conversation that we're having.
Good. Thank you. Yes, board liaison, Swisher.
The heck, there we go. Wrong button. User error. I just had one quick thought. What if you were to run the numbers and take out dispatches time? How much closer do we get? Or is that so minor that it doesn't matter? Because technically that's not your fault if dispatch is on the phone with people longer before they actually send you to the call. That's not on you, that's on them. And that could make a big difference to the little bit that you're off. Because I'll say I think that's still really impressive, the numbers, even though you're not meeting the 8-minute standard. I'm just impressed by what you guys do. So that was just my thought.
We could do that. Jennifer knows the number better than I do, but it ranges from 1 minute to 4 minutes for dispatch, right? So from the fire chief's perspective, I believe if we're doing our citizens and providing just service, we need to be measuring that time, because that's what that processing time, they're sitting on the phone with their loved one having a problem or their house on fire or whatever. I believe we need to be measuring that time. Now I'm okay. And Jennifer does this. Jennifer in the dashboard she's building, we do measure dispatched time to arrival also, right? We're doing a much broader picture. But I guess I would hate to not measure that, because I'm proud of the fact that we do. And I get we don't control it, but I'm proud of the fact that we measure it, because there are agencies that dispatch differently than we do, and their dispatch time is, 1.5 minutes longer than ours, but they don't measure it.
Yeah. I'm not
You're
saying
right.
don't measure that too. I'm just saying that gives a clearer picture
Mhm.
of here's when the call comes in to the end time. And then here's when you guys actually get told head out. And, it shows that you're not doing your part to try and
Right.
make that.
I understand that.
Okay, before we move on to Ms. Pardee and that data update, I see that we're at about 8:30. why don't we take our evening break for about 10 minutes? And then come back at 8:45 and we'll continue on with Ms. Pardee and more data from the operations update. So without objection, we'll be in a brief recess. Okay, we are back on the record for our South County Fire Board of Commissioners regular board meeting for July 16, 2024, coming out of our brief recess. And we are starting again on section 10B related to data update. And next up is Ms. Pardee. Good evening.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and put this in present mode just real quick. And jump right in. Okay, so tonight we just wanted to bring forward our emergency response data, looking back at the previous 3 years, as well as the last 6 months for 2024. And you will see the different slides that we have here for the different data types that we're going to cover. And just keep in mind that there's still some old data that I didn't analyze. There might be a couple discrepancies just because of my method of analyzing the data versus the previous person who analyzed the data. But I mean, that's very minor. Jumping right into our first slide, this couple key points looking at the growth. So looking at our pre-pandemic call volume in 2019, we had roughly 28,500 calls, and then post-pandemic kind of coming out, looking at 2022's data, we were at 34,185. So just seeing that we had that 20% swing, that was pretty significant swing in growth of call volume that we had. And then in 2023, we had a just a little bit over 5%. And I apologize, I've got a discrepancy on my slide there for I said 5.17 versus 5.4 for that increase going from 22 to 23. And the majority of that is all due to Mill Creek and Station 76, because that was our first year of servicing Station 76. And then lastly, looking at 2024's data here, we noticed that if we stay on track with what we have done for the first half of the year, we're going to land in the same call volume range that we had last year in 2023. Moving on to what type of calls in 23, the breakout versus 24, everything's pretty status quo. The biggest thing is you're just going to kind of see that the breakout is 85% versus 83% for our EMS. But really, I mean, we still got 6 months left in 2024 to see how that shakes out. Now we've got our call volume broken out by station, month, and day. There's no blaringly obvious things that have occurred here. We had a little bit of an uptick at Station 13 in 2023, but again, I think this is a direct result of us taking on Station 76. And so the way that we respond to certain calls in that region has changed a bit, because 76 used to be Surfers or Snohomish Regional and is now ours. And so with that, the deployment out of Station 77 has changed a bit. And so we see Station 13 having a bit of an uptick in calls. Then this is calls by hour of day. Again, it's trending very normally. You see that in daytime hours, we have heavier call volume than in our evening hours. Now we're going to look at our response times. And the thing to keep in mind here is we're looking at that total response. So we're doing call processing, which happens at Snow 911 for the dispatch center, as well as us turning out, getting to the apparatus, and then from getting to the apparatus to our wheels turning and arriving on scene. So our goal is 8 minutes. And with our data for 2024, we have met that 79.1% of the time. We're seeing that our response time achieved 90% of the time is 9 minutes and 22 seconds. You'll notice that's a little bit of an increase from last year. And one of the caveats is because we collectively at Snohomish County as a whole collectively changed priority levels on their data. So we had priorities 1 through 5 before, and now we have priorities 1 through 7. So what that is if we had 100 CAD call types saying we're going to dispatch it as this call type, well, those 100 call types were recategorized into different categories of whether they were priority or not and how we would respond to them. And that was a decision countywide. And as a result, some of our data rolled up a little bit differently than it had in previous years. And so that's why we see that increase. Going to the turnout time, looking at the same thing, our standard of 2 minutes and 15 seconds, we met that 75.3% of the time. And 90% of the time, we see 2 minutes and 52 seconds. Now you'll see our transports, again, nothing out of the norm here, very consistent with previous years and what we've done. Getting into our auto aid, this is at the unit level. So this is looking at all wheel turns that have occurred. And you will see this is 24 for aid given and aid received. Notice down below that we are looking at dispatches versus arrivals versus committed time. So dispatches is the units being dispatched at Snow 911 versus how many of those units actually arrived on scene. And then of all of that, how much time was spent amongst those units on those calls. And so if we looked strictly at arrivals, you're going to notice that a lot of things are within reason between aid given and aid received. There's nothing of great concern there. And same with our committed time. There's no heavy swing in committed time either. Then moving into that same thing for the year of 2023. And then going to 24's incident level. So now we're looking at just a singular incident, not all the units that were dispatched to the incident, but just the incident itself. And again, looking at our arrivals, you'll notice that there's a lot of equal. So like for instance, Snohomish Regional, 86 and 84. That's very comparable for aid given versus aid received. Lastly, comparing that to the year of 2023. And so you can clearly see our neighbor agencies with aid given and aid received. And then the roll up of the other category where we just have some outliers of other agencies where we've given aid or received aid from. And I think that was short and sweet. Do we have any questions or any slide that you'd like me to go back to?
Questions for the board members? For Ms. Pardee, any questions? I did have a question on the data and that as to the automatic aid slides. And Ms. Pardee, both for you and for Chief Eastman, my essential question is it fair, or is there any jurisdiction in which the aid is unfair?
I guess I'll answer, Commissioner Kennedy. I think we are in a really good place with mutual aid given and received. I think from my perspective, if you look at 23 and you look at 24 and you look at those years together and not look at one, we're in I believe a fair state. The thing we need to remember is we're a very large organization and we are always probably going to give a little bit more than we receive normally. That's probably a normal thing. Not always is that the case. And so if you look at, and I know folks look at Mukilteo, and so I'm just going to bring Mukilteo out. If you look at the unit level, which is on page 109, and I'm going to look at arrival, we went to Mukilteo 47 times at the unit level. I want to make sure I'm doing this right.
I need to know what slide. I apologize. I don't
Sorry.
have the page on mine.
The
top is going to say incident or unit.
No, she doesn't have that.
Unit level.
Okay,
Yeah, you're good.
For what year?
You're on the same.
24.
perfect.
So if I'm gonna, because Jennifer and I do things very similar, but I want to make sure as I explain this, I'm explaining it correctly. If you look at on page 109 of your packet, and it's a slide that Jennifer has up, and if you look at Mukilteo Fire, which is the third from the left on each one of the graphs, auto aid given, which is when we went to them at the unit level, is 47, and the units received was 63. Now you got to go back and then you look at time on task and we're almost identical. We provided a little bit more time on task. They were a little bit less time on task. So when we look at, you look at the incident level, I don't necessarily look at the dispatch because the dispatch is, agencies do things a little bit different. So we look at the dispatches, but we look at units arrived, and I look more at the committed time because I think that's the time our units are actually out of service doing work in that respected agency, and then their units are out of service doing work in our respected agency. And if you look at Mukilteo, though the numbers are off by a handful, our time on task is pretty equal, at least in 2024. And so when we looked at it, to answer your question specifically, Commissioner Kenny, we continue to monitor, and right now there's nothing I would come to the board and say, I got concerns about this. There's things we're watching. Obviously we watch Mukilteo for very specific reasons. We watch, some of those agencies coming in closely. But to be honest, I'm pretty happy with, I'm very comfortable giving just a little bit more than receiving. I think that keeps us in a good position. Because we're large and we have lots of agencies, we're always going to be able to send more units to Mukilteo than Mukilteo can send to us. That's just a reality of size. But when I look at time on task, which is for me, I think the most important metrics, I think we are within the ballpark, and where there's maybe more given than received. If you look at another year, it changes a little bit. And we look at it as trending over time. Rather than any one year. Commissioner Kenny, I think it was you that said, and I can't remember which meeting we were in recently about that, is that, 1 year it can be one way and the following year be exactly the other way with the same spread, just because of the nature of what we do and how things work. And so we look at it not just in the slice and date and time, but we look previous year, the previous year, previous year. And we've noticed over time that it can be lopsided 1 year in our favor, lopsided the following year, not in our favor. And when you look at it over the grand, over time, you see that flip flop versus a trend of we're giving more. We do organizationally. I know Chief Isotelo, Maxwell, and Anderson, as they look at deployment, are looking at individual stations and mutual aid and some of those other pieces because as they look at where we have resources and what we should be doing, they look at mutual aid and automatic aid to ensure that, that station itself, we're not hurting ourselves at a spot that's hardest for us to get to and jeopardizing response times for maybe the fringe stations because they're lopsided going in and getting things. But right now, I know Jason and I talked about it, and he's comfortable with where things are at. Sean and Todd are comfortable with things are at. Jennifer and Steve, who have been looking at this for me traditionally since Jennifer's been here, and Steve's been doing it since I've been doing data work. There's nothing that is saying, Chief, you better look at this. We're comfortable, and we continue to track, and we continue to make sure that it's equitable. And rest assured, if we think there's an out of balance, we will let you know.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any other, Commissioner Rowland?
So just one more question on that, and that is the last page here, page 111. So it's the incident level. That's one where I think the time on scene looks like it's a bit different, and it kind of a little bit more variance between given and received, and also the percentages definitely are off as far as percentages of arrivals. Is that, could you just explain a quick explanation?
So remember, incidence is at the event level.
Mm-hmm.
It does not take into account resource given. So in other words, in some of those incidents, we may be sending 7 units, right? Which is why you see when we go back and look at time on task, look at unit arrival versus incident arrival, it paints a better picture, right? For us. At the incident level, it does not take into account that Everett's giving us 3 units or District 7's giving us 5 units, or we're giving them more than 1, where the incident level is only counting 1. That's the difference.
Yeah, no, I understand that part of it. I guess my question is, is this an instance where they're being dispatched out, no matter how many units it is, but they're not actually needed, so they're only coming on site a certain percentage of the time, and we're able to get there? Is that kind of?
No, so here's some of the nuances of that. Every agency, so in other words, you see the disparagement about dispatches versus when we got on scene. And for example, let's talk about Everett. When Jason and John set up run cards, we set up and bring the appropriate units in. Not everybody does that, right? And so, and I think there's some differences with Everett where BLS, they have private ambulance do some of that work. We don't get called in to do that, right? And so the dispatches may be a little bit different because of what they've done operationally versus what we do. And so, and I'm probably not explaining that exactly where John would ask me to explain it, but because Everett chose to do some things different, we request them on those kind of calls, and then when we get units freed up, we cancel and let them go. Everett doesn't call us for that same style of call because they've got private ambulance that goes, and private ambulance goes all by themselves. They don't send a fire resource. We don't do that. We always make sure a fire resource goes. And so we dispatch that way. Everett does some different things. So when you see dispatched and canceled, that's where that discrepancy lands.
Okay, so if somebody were to ask me kind of what these numbers are, these percentages are, you would say that, 21% of the time shoreline fire, we ask for shoreline fire to come out, but they never get on scene, not because they don't want to, but probably because they're canceled before they get there.
Yep.
And in kind of our numbers, most of the time, other than shoreline fire, and Bothell, if we're called, we're almost always getting at least one unit on scene.
Yep.
It may not be all of them before it's canceled, but at least one.
True.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions on Ms. Party's report, the data report? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So Commissioner Kennedy, before we jump off of that, I know Jennifer, will you talk about where you want to take this and get to the one page and kind of give them an idea what you're thinking and get some of the board's input on that?
Yeah, the thought is, how frequently do you want to see data and how deep of a dive do you really want to go? So looking at that of thinking, okay, could we create a almost like a data report that comes out either quarterly or twice a year, where we look kind of right now at this time, and then after the full year is done and we look again, and kind of keeping like a one-page hit, right? Here are all my data elements that I want to see, and just being able to condense it down versus a formal presentation for something for you to just quickly grab and really be looking at. Just thinking through what you guys might like to be seeing and where we could take this and go. Because we've also created a dashboard. So just kind of getting some of that feedback. Of what the
Commissioner
hope-
Lawrence, then Commissioner Rowland.
Yes, to answer your question, a shallow dive once a year.
Nice.
Commissioner Rowland.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is this all kind of automated, or is this type of reporting that we're seeing here a bit more manual? Is it already in the, I don't think it's already in the dashboard, or is it?
Certain pieces are definitely in
Okay.
the dashboard. Auto aid would be an area that we could build out to provide in the dashboard. And then I think a little more of the year over year analysis where you're saying, I want to see 4 years stacked up next to it. I've got some of that built out, but not in all areas, because when you start getting to 90th percentile and some of those key data elements, it gets a little bit harder because on the back end in CAD, when we make changes, it's hard to isolate it to that frame of time that those changes were made.
So any of the other commissioners use Power BI for anything, created anything in it? It can be definitely that's why I was asking is about the amount of effort, both to do this as one-offs and to build it in. I don't know whether we should build it in or not, but if it's not a huge lift and there is the ability to do so, that may make it easier for us to consume on demand. But the shallow dive isn't a bad thing either. I just have one more thing, but I'll wait.
Other Commissioner Chan, then Commissioner Furnow, whatever his name is, Commissioner Furnow.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think we have a long history about this. I used to start with Chief Eastman doing all kinds of stuff with snow aisle, snow calm, so what we call now snow, all data, but I'm glad we finally we spent a lot of money on this, right? On this kind of program now, on that, and have you, to me, a commissioner, because two number they need to look at: budget and respond time. So I would like to see it every quarterly. It doesn't have to be extensive, but at least explain to us what happened. I think that's that's a chance too. If we need more resources to improve the number, we need to do it right away. And so if other commissioners don't want to see it, that's fine. But I think to me, it's critical. Two number, that's all I need to know about this whole organization. Thank you.
Commissioner Fernhoff.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, for your report. Really appreciate the detail and the work that went into it. Maybe a different approach might be just once we'd have set benchmarks, if you could just tell us on a quarterly basis that we're this way, this way, this way, red, green, yellow, whatever it is, and then let us inquire as to why we're below a particular benchmark. We can consult with operations and figure where things are at. If we have eye charts like this, I might go blind. Especially if it's all on one page, the entire packet, I think it would be too much data. But if you just signal, that we're on target or we're below whatever our intention is, that would be a simplified way of communicating to the board and allow them then to ask the questions more pertinent.
Okay.
Just a recommendation.
Commissioner Rowland.
Yeah, I would second that. Just putting a KPI, kind of like what we do with the response times around it. I trust staff. I mean, this gets into kind of, you guys will know when this starts going off the rails for a particular reason, and that's when you'll bring it to us. I don't think we need to review these quarterly. If we have a KPI, if we want to do the yearly shallow, I'm with that. I just think I trust you guys. If we don't need to have it quarterly, if you're going to come to us if there's a problem, then there's no problem with me not having to hear we're doing good every 3 months.
Okay, and
I just want to make comments.
Commissioner Shan.
As we are representing the taxpayer, I don't like the word. It's not that we trust you, don't trust you. When the system here, I think we need to have the data to make a decision. And then you can explaining why number go up and down. Otherwise, there's no point for us to be a commissioner if we trust you. We don't need to even sit here to talk about it. Thank you.
And I would just add twice a year, I think, is a sweet spot after the first half of the year, after the end of the year. Okay, I think very good. Thank you. Appreciate the data update. All right, moving forward in the agenda, we have committee updates, 11A, starting with capital facilities. Commissioner Lawrence. Anything?
Well, once again, I'm feeling very, very neglected.
We will be having a meeting in the very, very near future, Commissioner Lawrence. We'll be requesting one.
Okay, that takes us then to intergovernmental. Commissioner Wittes.
We have not had a meeting. The meeting I talked about with Snohomish, the regional one, I brought it up at the last meeting. They were looking at September 11th. It's now looking September 18th at 3 p.m. As soon as I find out a locked in date, I will email everybody, let them know.
Sounds good. Then we have Snow 911 with Commissioner Fernhoff.
Yes, Snow 911 will be meeting this Thursday, so we'll give you a report at our next meeting about the outcome.
Very good. That takes us forward in the agenda to item number 12, which is commissioner comments. Are there any commissioner comments? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Rowland.
Helps if you look around to see if there are any.
I know, I gotta try. I keep trying.
One of the things that kind of struck me in that report was what I asked about those percentages about the aid that we're receiving. The reason I asked that question is it's I don't want us to be seen as other organizations as the organization that cried wolf. We need help. We need help. We don't need your help. And then when we do need their help, they're maybe a bit slow to respond because they assume they're just going to get canceled in 2 minutes. So I don't know if there's anything that we need to do, if that's SNOCOM and protocols on their side, or if it's stuff on our side that we need to do, but I'd like to at least see that, we're not calling them out unnecessarily at such a high percentage for some of these. So whatever Woody can do on that would be great. But yeah, that's my only comment. Thank you.
Other commissioner comments? Liaison Swisher.
I don't know if you guys would consider this or not, but your next meeting is scheduled for the night of National Night Out.
Ah,
Is it-
liaison,
oh,
it's actually not.
Is it being done the day after?
It is.
Oh, good. See, I missed that. And that's why I was asking because I wasn't going to be here. I have to deal with a National Night Out in my city.
We've got you covered.
Fabulous.
Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Chan?
I'm really happy for today's open discussions about, how do we resolve the standard type of thing. And I hope, I just trust the people all sitting there are very innovative. And I just, I know sometime when I I say, talk about this, people think I'm crazy, but hopefully sometimes even concerned about, are we changing the system? But I think we need to have a really honest dialogue. Definitely, I'm not in your, but as the one who receiving the service, that to me, that's as a citizen concerned about receiving the service. So I appreciate it very much. I know you guys can give us a solution.
Any other commissioner comments? I did want to announce for the record that Mount Lake Terrace Board Liaison Jesse Hoffman has resigned from the board. And so we thank him for his service to South County Fire. I will be in touch with the Mount Lake Terrace City Manager and Mayor to invite them to make a new appointment to serve on the board in that board liaison position representing Mount Lake Terrace. So if it's okay, I may have something for our next meeting to recognize Board Liaison Hoffman and his service here at the board. Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Rowland.
Just one quick question for the agenda. It was something, I'm sorry, I was a bit late in coming. Is the executive session in item 13 related to item 14?
Yes.
Then I believe we have the wrong statute there. This is for the sale of property, not the acquisition of property, which would be B.
Okay. Well, we'll announce it for B then.
Just want to make sure we are doing things by the book.
Appreciate it. Any other commissioner comments? If not, up next, we have an executive session. Chief Eastman, 20 minutes, 30 minutes?
I think let's start at 20.
20. We'll do the executive session for 20 minutes from 8:20 to 8:40. This will be for under RCW 423110B to consider the minimum price at which real estate will be offered for sale or for purchase of real estate.
Actually, I have the actual word.
Do you want to read it?
If we have to say it, then yes.
Yeah, well, if you don't mind,
Okay.
please read it into the
To
record.
consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price.
Excellent. Thank
There
you.
we
I
go.
appreciate that. And so that will be for 20 minutes, 8:20 to 8:40. We will come back out of executive session and we do plan to take action. We do have another item on the agenda, which is item 14, property acquisition, 14A and B. So with that, we'll be in a brief recess for 5 minutes, back to the executive session room. And we'll stay.
10.
We do have our 10 o'clock deadline. That is true. So we'll be in a brief recess, back to executive session. Thank you.
So Peter.
The executive session has been extended by 5 minutes. The executive session has been extended for 5 minutes. The executive session has been extended for 5 minutes.
Okay, everybody, please resume your seats. We are ready to come back to the main meeting. Oh. What? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So we're back on the record from executive session back to the main meeting and item number 14 on the agenda, which is property acquisition. Starting with 14A, I think we are ready then I'll make a motion that we authorize the fire chief to sign the purchase and sale agreement for the property located at 2811 through 2819, 170th Street Southwest, Linwood, Washington. Is there a second?
Second.
That's to Commissioner Fernhoff. It's been moved and seconded to authorize the fire chief to sign that purchase and sale agreement. What?
The guy at the end.
Commissioner Fernhoff. Is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Rowland.
Yes, I'm just making sure I get the address right for this one, and I do believe I have the right one here. I'm going to be voting no on this, simply because I believe the price above the appraised and assessed value is excessive, and that we need to be actually being better stewards of our public money. We need to be getting a good price for what we're doing, and I mean, this is benefiting the public. This is benefiting, this is a thing for people's lives. People shouldn't be profiting unnecessarily over it just because they think that they can get more. So I'm going to be voting no on this one.
Any other discussion on the motion? Any other? Commissioner Chan.
Yeah, I know the location of the place. I think definitely, yeah, the price is high, but I think the staff did a very good research. I think that is the only option we have now to really fit into our plan. So I support this.
Any other discussion on the motion? Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes on a 6-1 vote with Commissioner Rowland voting no. Next up is item 14B. Yeah.
Okay.
So the next one will be a motion. I'll make a motion to authorize the fire chief to sign the purchase and sale agreement for the property located at 2905, 2909, 170th Street Southwest in Linwood, Washington.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Rowland to authorize the fire chief to sign that purchase and sale agreement. Is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Rowland?
I would just like to say for this one, the difference between the two is a 16% over assessed versus a 60%. While I realize there's, realities of 16%, that is completely justifiable, understandable, and I think it's something that we should say yes to.
Other discussion on the motion? Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. That was our last item of business. Our next meeting will not be on Tuesday, the first Tuesday of August. It is the so it's not Tuesday, August 6th that we had at the start of the year, we had set it especially to avoid National Night Out. It is Wednesday, August 7th at 7 p.m. will be our next meeting right back here. There being no other business before the board, without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you.
There's going to be a lot of hangovers that